We have all been very, very busy this past week because of what is going on in Israel. And I'm sure that all of us are doing whatever we can to put Israel's case across here in the UK. I'm going to just start off with the boring stuff, and that's the house rules. You're welcome to all leave your videos on, but if I could just ask that you all turn your mics onto mute, that would be very much appreciated. And that's really, it's not that we don't want to hear from you, it's just that we want to focus everyone's attention onto the speaker. So for those of you who haven't yet done so, could you please mute your microphones? And if, as I say, please feel free to leave your videos going. So events in Israel, as we know, it's been the most horrendous week for Israelis who, even up in the north, there have been rockets launched in the past day and today even from Lebanon. Tuvia will be able to tell you a lot more, being in Israel and being on the ground, so to speak. But what I wanted to just say is that here at the ZF, with the WZO, we have been busy all week preparing for a Solidarity with Israel rally that will be happening in London this coming Sunday, the 23rd of May. For obvious security reasons, bearing in mind what we've seen happening on, at some of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations that have been happening, and the convoys draped in Palestinian flags that have been going through the predominantly, the more Jewish areas of London. We are unable at this time to release the exact timing and the exact venue, but it will be in central London, and it will be the very early afternoon. That's all we can tell you at this time. For those of you who are on our newsletter list, you may have already received one about half an hour ago, just with some updates about Sunday, and we will be posting all the current information and the latest information onto our social media channels, and also sending out to our email database. So please do keep a lookout, and if you are able to join us, please do so, because now more than ever, Israel needs us. It needs a good show of support, and we can do that together. Together we're more united, and together we're stronger. So please do consider joining us. Right. All of that said, I am going to hand over now to our lovely, wonderful guest presenter speaker tonight, Dr. Tuvia Book, who, for those of you who have joined us before, you'll all be very, very familiar with him by now. And that's the man that you've come to see. So not me, I'm handing over to Tuvia. So Tuvia, it's all yours.
Good evening from Israel, everybody. I do also, on the subject of housekeeping, do need to make a slightly unusual announcement, and that is basically in the event that I have to vacate this seat, it's because I'm going to the room behind me because someone's trying to kill me, known as the Hamas terrorist organization. I have a strong room right behind me in my apartment, and there's also an iron dome next to my apartment as well. And therefore, the session which we're going to see tonight has actually been pre-recorded. In case of that, but being British, you have to keep a stiff upper lip and keep calm, as my shirt says. Keep calm and let the tour guide handle it. Okay, so basically, you might wonder why, with all the current affairs and everyone out to get us, not that we have a persecution complex, we just think everyone's out to get us the last 4,000 years. So why is it relevant to sit and study some dusty archaeological site with all that's going on in the world right now? And the truth is, nothing could be more relevant. In fact, interestingly enough, after another evil regime was defeated, Nazi Germany, one of the first things that was done by the Allied forces in Nazi Germany was a process called denazification. And that included not only replacing all of the judges who'd supported the system, but also the entire educational system had to be replaced, because basically from kindergarten upwards and the Hitler Youth, the German children had been taught that the Jews are evil and we need to kill them. So there was an entire process called denazification, which is basically re-education towards the fact that we're all made in God's image. Now, we have an entity called the Hamas, which is quite close to where I am right now, actually, and very close to where my parents are, which is why they're not on tonight, because as we're talking, the city they live in is actually being shelled, as I can see from the updates on my phone. And they're in their strong rooms. It's all very dramatic and all very much happening. The big difference is, of course, that we can defend ourselves, that we don't need to rely on the pity of our host nations. The Jews are in charge of their own destiny. And that's really what upsets a lot of the woke liberal people, that they don't like the strong Jew that can fight back. They like the weak Jew, with like the little boy with his hands up in the Holocaust. When you see a strong Jew on top of a tank who can actually fight back for Jewish honor and pride, and Jews in charge of their own destiny, that's what bothers the woke liberals. And if you want to start playing the number game, of course, anyone who was alive in World War II, or you've learned about it, will know in the Blitz, there was about 60,000 Londoners who were killed. Just in Dresden alone, in the firebombing of Dresden, there was over 450,000 Germans killed in one city. So Israel's not going to sit here and take lectures from people about disproportionality and about war crimes and how to respond and how not to respond, because there's only one country in the world which is the Jewish homeland. It's the country I'm in right now. And it's the country we're here to learn about as well. And also, I'm very proud to say that Israel has the most moral army in the world. I should know I was in it. I served for 2 years in Gaza and a long time all over the place in the various disputed territories in Lebanon. And what we're going to do tonight is something called education. And it's important. Just like when they say Israel's committing war crimes and you know it's not right, but you don't know how to respond, it's quite simple. War crimes are such things like using child soldiers, using civilian shields, firing non-guided rockets to civilian populations, targeting international airports, tunneling into a foreign country in an attempt to kidnap, using protected sites such as schools and hospitals and mosques to store munitions. They are simple war crimes, we know that. But part of responding, of course, is, and I recommend that you afterwards go to YouTube and look at brilliant debate in Oxford University, where they put on a motion that Israel is to blame for the terror in the Middle East and not the Hamas. It was actually a motion put by Oxford University and in their debate society. And Dennis Prager came and demolished it. It's well worth the 10 minutes on YouTube, Dennis Prager, Oxford University, to understand that, as Goebbels said, you have something called the big lie, that if you get a lie and keep repeating it over and over, everyone will say, well, can the whole world be wrong and Israel right? And the answer is yes. So tonight we're going to talk about that. Tonight we're going to talk about the process of education. Part of the Hamas attempt to delegitimize our presence in the land is to delegitimize our claim to this very land. And I'm going to read you a few comments from my book from the Palestinian Authority's educational website. And this is what it says. Abraham was not a Jew. The Jews never lived in ancient Israel. There was never a temple in Jerusalem. Jews never had any connection to Jerusalem. That's not the Western Wall at all, but a Muslim shrine. So how do you feel when you hear this deliberate distortion of history, right? It should make your blood boil. But the question is, how do you respond? These are not quotations from marginal people. They're from mainstream Palestinian opinions and not extremists. They're taken from historians. They're taken from school textbooks. They're taken from the Ministry of Information. How does one respond? Here's another classic. The first inhabitants of Palestine were Canaanite Arabs. That's from a textbook in called National Education, a third grade textbook. I'll say it again because this is the theme of our talk tonight as well. The first inhabitants of Palestine were Canaanite Arabs, right? How does one respond to that? The whole sentiment is anachronistic. Because if you know a bit of history, which we'll learn a bit tonight, you'll know that the Canaanites were the people who were there at the time of our forefathers and foremothers, even though it was only 3 fathers and 4 mothers. We're talking about the time of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca and Jacob and Rachel and Leah, and of course, let's not forget his concubines. And we're talking about 3,500 years ago. There was Canaanites in this land when the Israelites and the Canaanites were here at the same time. Canaanites basically were either conquered or married out of existence by about 2,000 years ago. They didn't exist anymore. Then you have Canaanite Arabs. When did the Arabs come to this land? In the Islamic conquest in 637 CE or AD. So there's a 1,500 year discrepancy between Canaanites and Arabs, yet they happen together in the same sentence. And the very word Palestine itself was a Roman invention in the 2nd century when they renamed Judea after those revolting Jews kept on revolting. And after the 3rd unsuccessful revolt, they decided to de-Judaize Judea and call it Syria Palestina. So you can't have the word Palestine, Canaanite, and Arab all in one sentence unless you're ignorant. And that, my friends, is a real problem because people are ignorant. And one of the biggest ways to prove our connection to the land from a non-theological point of view, yes, you can read the Bible and say, it says in the Bible, but if you don't believe the Bible, you're not a religious person, then you can say, well, that's just a theological propaganda treatise. Is there any hardcore evidence of the Jewish claim to this land? So I have 2 things here for show and tell. Objects are always very important. I'm going to start with something from the 20th century. In the 20th century was the greatest catastrophe the Jewish people have ever known because we lacked a Jewish homeland, right? We did not have a Jewish homeland in 1938. We had it in 1948. If we would have had it in 1938, we wouldn't have had the Holocaust. 1 out of 3 Jews were murdered because they were Jewish. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The British slammed the gates of the land of Israel shut when the Jews needed it the most. And there was no army to defend the Jews, and 1 out of 3 Jews were killed. My mother was born in London. Her parents were Eastern European immigrants. Her mother came from Hungary. Her father came from Poland. They were the only sole survivors of both of their families. And I went to Hungary with a roots trip with my sister to my grandmother's village. All the Jews were deported in 1 day from Auschwitz to Auschwitz and murdered. All I found in the rubble of what used to be the synagogue was this. This is a broken piece, a wooden broken piece of a Torah. And that's the only proof we have that Jews once lived in this town for many, many centuries. It's tangible, it's hard, it's historical evidence that there was once a Torah that this was attached to in a town on the border of Hungary and Slovakia called Szartói, where no Jews live today anymore. The next show and tell is a coin. This is a coin minted 2,000 years ago. Let me just put it in front of the camera. And on it, it says in ancient Hebrew, Lecherut Zion, for the freedom of Zion. And this coin was minted when the Jews were rebelling against the Romans 2,000 years ago. It's an original coin, right? So that proves that 2,000 years ago, there's a place called Zion. There's people that spoke Hebrew, and they minted their own coins. We're going to go back even further than that. We're going to go back another 1,500 years, so to about 3,500 BC, when the world's first monotheist, Honest Abe, otherwise known as Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father, walked from the Fertile Crescent all the way from Mesopotamia. And the Hebrew's first name was Ivri, which today you translate as Hebrew, but basically Ivri is me'ever lenahar, from over the river. And basically Abraham had a very long, what we call an odyssey, an epic journey, all the way along the entire Fertile Crescent, until he got to the land of Canaan itself. So 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, in the land of Israel, there were Canaanites, and they lived in polises, city-states, where each one had a king. There was a king of Jebus, the Jebusites, which is now called Jerusalem. There was a king in Hatzor. There was a king in Megiddo, which is in Greek called Armageddon, by the way. And there was a king in a place called Gezer. So Abraham might have come to the city 3,500 years ago and seen what we're about to see now. Now that's interesting, right? And if fast forward the clock another 500 years, to around 3,000 BC. What is the central prayer of the Jewish people, right? The Jewish central prayer of the Jewish people is a prayer called the Shema. And one of the lines in it, besides a profession of monotheism, believe in one God, is also Vishinantam Levanecha, to teach your children well. Jews are the only people in the ancient world, and even in much of today's world, that emphasize universal literacy, where both boys and girls read. Even today, in the 21st century, about 60% of women in developing countries are still illiterate, still cannot read and still cannot write. I went to volunteer in India a couple of times and in slums to teach art in these schools, and the parents couldn't help their kids with the homework because the parents couldn't read and write. That's the 21st century. And yet Judaism always specializes in universal literacy. Why am I giving you this background? What would an archaeologist's dream be when they find an ancient city to identify this city? What would they most wish for? And the answer is, of course, I can't have a dialogue with you guys because you're all on mute. The answer, of course, is to find the actual city's name, like "Welcome to Jerusalem" and "Have a nice day," written in Greek or Canaanite. And that's what actually happened in the city we're about to visit now, called Gezer. The archaeologists actually found a sign in Greek saying "City Limits of Gezer," which is just like beyond belief. So without any reasonable doubt, we have an identification. And if you find a place called Gezer, you look it up in the ancient text, in the Bible, in the El Amana letters in Egypt, to see, was such a place recognized? And yes, it's in the Book of Kings, it's in the El Amana letters, it was controlled by Egypt, conquered by Solomon, it's all there, and they found it. Now, that's not even the dramatic finds, the big walls and the big gates, right? And the idol worshipping sites, which we're about to see when we travel through Gezer. The real dramatic sign is about this big, and it is a small clay tablet written in ancient Hebrew by a young schoolboy, one of the oldest Hebrew inscriptions ever found on the planet Earth. Now, you might wonder what's written on it, and for this, we're about to see. And so hold on your hats. And Dima is about to start. For 90 minutes now, we're going to step back 3,500 years in history, see through the eyes of our ancestors what they would have seen. And the incredible thing about this particular site is it's very, very close to the airport. Quite often I have groups land in the airport, and 21st century glass, concrete, everything. And then within a quarter of an hour, we've gone back in time 3,500 years to see a Canaanite city that our ancestors would have seen. And one of the four cities fortified by King Solomon himself in the Book of Kings. So let's spend 90 minutes traveling in our past. And as our rabbis teach us, we need to know where we come from and be proud of where we come from in order to know where we're going to as Jews as well. So let's go for a bit of time travel. Afterwards, we'll have some Q&A, and you're welcome just to write comments on the chat section on the side. And let's go. Welcome to Gezer and have a nice day. I run. Bruchim habayim, welcome to Tel Gezer. I've just run up here, and slightly on the warm side, but the most important thing in days of yore and days of mine, wherever a city was built, was the same word 3 times: location, location, location. So let's see where we are. Over there to the west is the coastline of Israel, the Mediterranean Sea, the famous ancient route of the Via Maris, Derech Hayam, the route of the sea. All the way on the other side to the east, where the sun has just risen, are the hills of Jerusalem. So this city, when it was built, was between Jerusalem and the coast over there. Just over there, to that direction is the holy city of Modi'in, where you can see rising from the hills where we live over there. That's the lowlands. And behind us is a new settlement of Karmei Yosef. You have ancient Israelites, Jews living on one side of the valley in their remains, and the Jews who came back living on that side over there. But why would someone want to build a city? And this city is old, it's ancient. goes all the way back to Canaanite times. In fact, Abraham walked in this very city. My foot's over here are literally walking in the footsteps of our fathers and our mothers. Abraham and Sarah walked on this land here. Why build a city? And the answer begins with D, 4 times. 1, driving, because it has to be on a major driving route. 2, defense. We're on top of a hill, easy to defend. Does man live on water alone? No, but you definitely need to drink. That's the 3rd D. How do they get water on these parched hills? We will find out soon. And the last D, of course, was dining. So just go over those again. Drink and drive, not at the same time. Dining and defense. All 4 Ds over here. Now, how do we know where we are? Because I have a British accent, so everything sounds convincing. I can say we're in Tel Gezer, and you will say, wow, he sounds so smart and intelligent. That's because I'm British. I could read the football scores, and you'd say, wow, he sounds so smart and intelligent. So what proof do we have that? I'm not just making it up. First of all, there's a little Arab village near here called Gezer, and quite often the Arab villages preserve the ancient names, but unbelievably, when they started digging on this massive man-made mound of cities, one on top of the other, imagine a 7-layer cake. So this is a 13-layer hill, a biblical tell of strata, one on top of the other. And the lower you go, the older you get. And unbelievably, in a very rare occurrence, archaeologists here found a 2-word inscription. Gezer. This is the boundary of the city of Gezer. Unbelievable. That's not the important inscription. The most important world-famous inscription found in this very site, one of the most ancient Hebrew inscriptions of all time, is replicated over here. This is called the Gezer Calendar. Luach Gezer. And believe it or not, folks, it's written in Hebrew. You can't read it. This is the Hebrew of the Bible. For 500 years, Jews wrote this Hebrew. The Torah was written in this Hebrew. Every single biblical manuscript ever found from the biblical period was written in this Hebrew. But what we call Hebrew today was brought back from the Jews from Babylonia. It's actually called Aramaic square script. This is called Paleo Hebrew, and everybody used it. The Canaanites, the Jews, the Phoenicians, the Edomites. This was like the Latin alphabet at the time, and this is what everyone used. Now, it fell out of use around 500 BCE, but whenever there's something patriotic, the Jews once again would go back to the old Hebrew. I have with me over here a coin, a replica of a coin from the Second Temple period. This is from the famous revolt against the Romans. And inside you see a pomegranate, as they're all around here. And in ancient Hebrew it says Yerushalayim HaKadoshah. That's what we were fighting for. And on this side it says Chetzi Shekel, with a chalice. It's not the Holy Grail, but it's a chalice which the Levites used in the temple service. Incredible but true. Every time God's name was written in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's written in ancient Hebrew. And these letters were basically like a picture. Every letter was a picture. And we're going to talk more about the Gezer Calendar, the very place it was found, believe it or not, right next to a gate built by your friend of mine, King Solomon. So this is not a history lesson. It's not her story. It's not his story. It's our story. And we're literally going to work in the footsteps of our fathers and our mothers, all the way from Abraham and Sarah, all the way to the wise King Solomon in this very site. Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah. They are names that you hear in Hebrew school in that dusty book called the Bible, black words on a white page. But here it comes alive as we literally walk in the footsteps of the first Jews. Imagine, he came from, where did he come from? That's right, he came from the most advanced city in Mesopotamia. And God says to him and to Sarah, Lech lecha me'artecha, go from your land. Go to where I'm going to show you. The first 2 words in Judaism, lech lecha, you go. Don't be a hypocrite, say let someone else do it. If it's important, you've got to get up and you've got to do it yourself. It's to do, it's to do. It's not enough just to talk. You need to walk the walk. And our first ancestors did exactly that. And they went on a very circuitous route called the Fertile Crescent, all the way from Mesopotamia, along, and eventually they come to this provincial backwater of Canaan. I just happen to have on me a map. Ta-da! So in the Bible, Israel is called a broad and a good land, Eretz Chemda Tova Rechava, which of course you might think is Jewish propaganda because we see the map this way. Back then, when people oriented themselves, oriented to the east, they would see the map this way because the sun always rises in the east. And if you look at Israel this way, it's indeed a wide land. And Abraham would have come all the way, and Sarah all the way from the Iraq over there, along to the north of Israel, along the coastal plain, and visited exactly where we are right now, the ancient city of Gezer, right over here. That's where we're standing. We've literally followed the footsteps, or in this case, I've run the footsteps of our mothers. And what happens when you eventually get to this massive city on top of a hill? This is what Abraham saw through his eyes. And we're looking today, the Jews of today, looking at what the Jews saw in ancient times, a mud brick gate, a huge big fortification. The remains of the wooden, of these stone chambers underneath, you can see over there where the guards would wait. And the city wall right next to us is an amazing, staggering 20-foot thick, a huge wall. And he must have looked at this thing and thought, wow, what an advanced civilization. Of course, we need to ask ourselves the questions, and that is, where did these guys get their water from? What did they do inside the city? What was it like to be a Canaanite? Because don't forget, at this time, the Jewish population of the world was 2, Abraham and Sarah. And they come here, they come to this amazing, rich, populous city. And what do they see? Let's go and explore. Right next to the wall is one of the most important parts of the city, just behind the wall, and that is why they call it the Holy Land. If you look behind us, you see a massive gaping hole carved into the soft limestone, going down at a 45-degree angle all the way down to the bottom. And that noise you can hear, by the way, folks, holy cow, Batman, those are fruit bats. Hundreds of fruit bats flying in the cave today. But back in the time of Abraham and Sarah, you'd have seen men, and probably women mainly, and donkeys going down this staircase, and underneath the wooden staircase are the carved stone cases carved into the bedrock. That's not where the Flintstones live, but that is the actual rock of the mountain itself, the soft limestone, all the way down to the bottom where we have D number 2, drink. That's where the water table would be. So year-round, they would have a water supply, both from the water table and the big water tunnel in the Bronze Age, 3,000 years ago, developed by the advanced Canaanites. And in addition, each house and palace had its own private system. So this was the city's main water supply, and therefore was protected by the walls and guard towers. D number 2. Imagine sitting here on this very spot 3,000 years ago and suddenly hearing a noise and a shouting and trumpets and drums. And you look up towards the road over here and you see the royal entourage coming. And inside where I'm sitting right now, this is the entrance of the gate of the time of King Solomon. And King Solomon himself and his entourage might have gone through this gate in a stream and a noise. And here we are today in the year 2020. It's kind of surreal to imagine that 3,000 years ago, the very man who built the first temple walked on the same ground over here. We're literally walking in the footsteps of our ancestors. And that's what it means to be in Israel. It's a spiritual experience. It's an all-body experience. All of our senses, we can walk it, we can touch it, we can smell it, we can feel it, we can taste it. And there's no replacement for that experience. Now, here we are, beautifully built gate over here, lovely stones. They haven't moved in 3,000 years, even though the construction is dry construction, no cement. Despite the earthquakes, it's still standing strong. You can see the different chambers where the guards would wait, trying to stop people walking into the city itself. It was strong, it was fortified. We're not here to talk about these massive stones, we're talking about a little stone that was found right over here, one of these chambers. This stone, a stone this size, was where the famous Gezer Calendar was written on. It's about this big. The original is in Istanbul in the Archaeology Museum, where I was last week, but it was found over here. And what makes it so special It was one of the earliest Hebrew inscriptions. Judaism, unlike any other ancient faith, specialized and emphasized universal education, not just for the boys, but also for the girls. In fact, the most holy prayer in Judaism is the Shema prayer. And one of the lines is, you should teach your children well. Crosby, Stills and Nash later paraphrased that to teach your children well, right from the Shema. And what was this on this inscription, on this shard, which is an ostraka with an inscription on? Nothing biblical, but a simple calendar, a writing exercise on what you plant in each month of the year, like a poem about agriculture, because agriculture was super important for ancient Israelites. But most interestingly, at the bottom of the calendar was 3 letters in Hebrew, Aleph, Bet, Yud, which is the word Avi. And you could tell it wasn't written by an expert scribe. You could tell there was corrections. It was written on soft chalk. And the theory is it was written by a schoolboy called Avi, and he was practicing his writing exercises. So imagine 3,000 years ago, one of the God's sons was sitting in this gate chamber here, bored and practicing his school homework, writing in Hebrew. And here we are 3,000 years later, not just ancient ruins. If you look over the valley, the beautiful modern city of Karmei Yosef, the modern town on the other side of the valley. Here Jews lived, and here Jews lived. Down Me'ayin Bata, know where you come from. This is our ancient history, where we're deeply rooted into our land, into these very stones. History, his story, our story. Banana Tolech, and where have we come to? 3,000 years later, the Jews are back in their beautiful, fertile land, living, laughing, and loving. And here I am, sitting on top of a high place, in the high place. Imagine honest Abe, otherwise known as Avraham Avinu, and honest Sarah, otherwise known as Sarah Imenu, Sarah our mother and Abraham our father. They come to this city. They've looked at the beautiful fortifications and the water systems and the gateway, and the advanced civilization. And they come to the highest part of the city. And what do they see? They see what you're looking at right now. Not a guy with an English South African accent and a blue t-shirt and a red Liverpool hat. They see what's underneath you. They see a pile of stones, tall standing stones. Clearly, this was the focus of the entire city. And right underneath this massive cultic site, Israel's Stonehenge, dating all the way back to the Bronze Canaanite period, that is 3 millennia, 3,000 years old, is this stone basin, carved into the bedrock. Archaeologists, when excavating here, were shocked to find bones, not animal bones, but human bones. And this pit over here was used for human child sacrifice. Now, what we call the test of Abraham, we read about it on the high holidays. It's called the sacrifice of Isaac, even though it should really be called the near sacrifice of Isaac. And even show all the biblical pictures show Isaac as a little boy. He was actually a 37-year-old young man, so it was pretty intense and traumatic for him. What does God say to Abraham? I happen to have an actual Bible on me, so let's look at the text. This is a modern Bible. And on it is an app called, and you should walk them all your days of Letech Havader. And it says here in the book of Genesis, Kach et bincha, take your son. And Abraham could have said, well, I've got 2 sons. I've got Abraham, he said. I could have said, I've got Isaac, and I've got Ishmael. He says, lo, Kach et asher hafta, the one you love. Well, I could love them both. Et yechidcha, take your only son. And he could have said, well, they're both only sons. One was born to Sarah, one was born to Hagar. And then finally God says there'll be no misunderstanding. Et Yitzchak, take Isaac. And where are you supposed to go? Kach el makom asher ani areka. Go to the place I'm going to show you. So Abraham's traumatized. He's just been told to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac, the son of his old age. But that's what everyone did anyway. Everyone sacrificed their children. So what makes this religion differently? But even so is the word of God. So the Bible says, Genesis, Abraham got up early in the morning to do the will of God. This is something we learn. Don't be lazy. If it's important and right, get up and do it. And he took with him his donkey and 2 youths and Isaac. And what happened when he got to the site itself? what happened? He said to the two youths, Nelech v'nashuv, which in Hebrew means we will go up and we will come back. So even though this is called the test of Abraham, my friends, it was Abraham testing God. He was saying, if we want a God of kindness, we will both go to the top of this mountain, which is just over there in Jerusalem, Hamoriah, and we will both come back. I want a God of life, not a God of death. So it was a test of God, as well as God testing Abraham. And what happened? They got to the top, and as we all know, as Abraham is dramatically rising up his knife in a place just like this, where children were sacrificed, God said to him, Al tishlach et yadcha. Don't send out your hand. Don't kill your son. I just wanted to see how far you go. But of course, I am the God of life. And what was Abraham's reward? He said, look up and count the stars of the heaven. Let's look up over here. What do you see? Where are the stars? This happened in the morning sacrifice. You see one star over there. We call it the sun. There are thousands, millions, billions of stars, but we can't see them. Why can't we see them, my friends? Because the sun blots them out. The light of the sun blots out billions of stars. We must not be blinded by materialism. We must understand the important things in life, our children, our families, our friends, spirituality, meaning, purpose. Everyone needs a purpose in their life. Let materialism not blind us. Let us rather go beyond the sun, beyond materialism, and look for what's really important in our life, our eternity. Our eternity is our children, our good deeds, and what we do to make the world better. Letaken olam tikkun olam. We want to leave a better world behind, and we want that world to be enjoyed by our eternity, our children, our families. We want a life of good deeds. And that's what we learn in this place. Rosh Hashanah, year 2020, we go all the way back in time. We don't want this. We don't want to sacrifice our children. We don't want to run after the God of our materialism. We want a deeper meaning in life, not to die for it. We want to live for it. We want a life full of purpose, meaning, light, and beauty. Shana Tova, a wonderful, happy, healthy, and meaningful New Year. Tell Gezer. Very strict. Okay, I don't know about you guys. I was watching it here in Israel, thousands of miles away, and it seems quite jumpy. I don't know whether you saw it okay in England, because I sent a pre-recorded version earlier. For those of you that want to see it real time without all the jumpiness, then you're welcome to go into YouTube and put in 2 words, Tuvia Book, which, yes, is my name. And you'll find my YouTube channel, and you can find the 20 minutes you just watched now on Gezer, and you can watch it on your own computers real time and catch it without all the jumpiness. So now we are open for questions. And of course, one thing I'd like to say before I take questions is that Judaism has always emphasized life. It's not a culture of death, it's a culture of life. And that's why when Abraham went with his son, he said, we'll go and we'll come back, because I want a God that sanctifies life. And in Judaism, we learn ופחות בחיים, you should always choose life. And that's very important, not just our love of life and our love of education, you see with that small Gezer Calendar, but also our deep roots of this land that we live in right now. We just finished a holiday of Shavuot, and I went with my bike out in the fields near where I live. And what did I see? All the barley, all the wheat, all the crops. Because we need to remember, we're not just the people of the book, no pun intended, but we're also the people of the land as well. And all of our holidays are about the agricultural cycle in Israel. And so we're deeply connected to this very land, despite what our enemies might say with the big lie. When you go to sites, archaeological sites, where Jewish archaeologists find 2,000-3,000-year-old inscriptions, it's an incredible thing. We're the only people that can find 3,000-year-old remains in our own land and still be able to read them and understand them. So that's why it's important, even in modern current times, to understand our history through archaeology. Archaeology, for those of you that don't know, is the Greek words archaeo and logos, which is ancient knowledge. Now, let's take some questions. I'm just reading what people have written over here. Where's the music coming from? That's the soundtrack, kids. The music came from the recording, as you'll see properly when you go to the YouTube channel. If the Hebrew we know today originated from Babylon around 550 BCE, and Paleo Hebrew originated many centuries previously, how can the Torah, which originated around 1000, be written in Hebrew? The answer is the Hebrew that was around in Abraham's time, and the Hebrew that's around in King David's time, and the Hebrew that's around today are all the same language. What changed was the way the letters were written. Today, there's most languages around the world, they use the Latin alphabet, even though it's a different language. Latin alphabet, whether it's in French or Italian or Spanish, it's still written in the Latin alphabet. So back in the Canaanite times, until the Babylonian expulsion, there was an alphabet which is called Proto-Canaanite. And everyone used this alphabet. That's what the Gezer Calendar was written in. And that's what Edomite inscriptions are written in. That's what Phoenician inscriptions are written in. That's what Hebrew inscriptions are written in. It was the language of each nation, but the alphabet was the universal alphabet. Once the Babylonians sent the Jews into exile, most of the Jews were expelled by 586 by the Babylonians. The Jews then, as they do everywhere they live, like I'm looking at all these English names over here that you all have, and you speak English. So when the Jews went to Babylon, they followed Jeremiah's advice, and they adopted many customs of the country they lived in, including the alphabet. So the alphabet, which we know and love today, it's the same letters, it's the same language, but it's written in a different way. We actually adopted the Babylonian Aramaic square alphabet for our own alphabet as well, just as we adopted their names. We had Purim a few months ago, and the two heroes, Mordechai and Esther, they're not Jewish names. Mordechai is from Marduk, who's the Babylonian deity, and Esther was from Astarte, who was the goddess of fertility. So the Jews adopted their alphabet, their clothes, their language, but they still remain Jewish. Just like wherever Jews live, they adopt the cultural customs around them, but still stick to their Judaism. So that's how the alphabet changed. Next question. Golda Meir always mentioned it. I'm not sure what she mentioned. What did Golda Meir mention? Jews' sanctified life, yes. The famous Golda Meir quote is, when the Arabs love their children more than they hate ours, then we'll have peace. That is true. There's always been a sanctity of Jewish life. Is Gezer mentioned in the Torah? Connected to Abraham. So Gezer is mentioned in the Torah, not connected to Abraham. Abraham is actually mentioned as going to the land of the Canaanites. The first person Gezer is mentioned historic in the Torah, at least, is in the time of Solomon. It says that Solomon fortified 4 cities in the Book of Kings: Gezer, Hatzor, Jerusalem, Megiddo. In all of those 4 cities, they found exactly the same architecture. In fact, Gezer was the last one excavated by Yigal Yadin in the 1970s, and he did a trick. He put a stick on the ground and said, dig underneath this stick and you'll find a stone wall. And the people were digging, they found a stone wall. They went, wow, it's magic, how'd he do that? Then he walked 5 meters, put another stick in the ground and says, dig underneath here, you'll find another stone wall. And they dug and they found another stone wall. And people were amazed, like, how does he know there's something underground? Does he have x-ray vision? And the answer was very simple. Even though he was a secular Jew, he knew his Bible, and he knew there was 3 other towns, Megiddo, Jerusalem, and Hatzor, they all had Solomonic gates, and they all exactly the same measurements. So he took those measurements and basically transferred it to Gezer and found the gate that Solomon built. And it's an incredible thing, I have to tell you. You saw me sitting on that gate to know that 3,000 years earlier, I would have actually seen King Solomon himself riding through that gate. So it is mentioned in the Book of Kings, Gezer. It's also mentioned in the Book of Chronicles as well. In fact, Solomon received it as a dowry from Pharaoh of Egypt when he married his daughter. What else do we have here? Jews mentioned, Gezer Calendar, please. What's the different date? Oh, can you explain the Gezer Calendar? Gezer Calendar basically is not a religious text. It was just, as I mentioned, a schoolboy's homework, and it was an agricultural calendar, like you learn in rote. Like, when we go to school, we learn, this is how Shakespeare wrote it. You have a rhyming couplet, you have 14 lines. So there's basically, it was rhyming couplets. In the month of this and so you plant this crop. In the month of this and so you plant this crop. So it's not a religious text. It's nothing that appears in the Bible. It's basically schoolboy homework. What makes it interesting are 2 things. A, it's written in Hebrew, and B, it also shows the connection of the Jews to the land, that the practice homework was an agricultural calendar. And by the way, if you want to see the original, it's in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum. because it was found during the Ottoman Empire. What is the root of the word Gezer? Very good question. We're not exactly sure. It's not carrot. Everyone thinks, oh, it's to do with carrot, because it's the Hebrew word for carrot. But it was interesting that before they found the inscription which mentioned Gezer, their local Arab village nearby was called Gezer. And quite often the Arab villagers would keep the original name of the biblical site as well. What else are we saying? So you're saying that we read from the Torah today is not what God gave, it's an updated version. No, we read the same words. It's just that it's just written in a different font, if you want to explain it that way. So this coin that I showed you before, this Chewutzion coin, is written in Old Hebrew. If anyone's been to Israel recently, BC, before Corona, and you've seen a 1 shekel coin, it'll say on it 1 shekel in modern Hebrew, and on the back it is 3, they look like squiggles. That's ancient Hebrew. It's like a tribute to the fact that the font changed. It's the same letters, the alphabet, they have the same name, it's the same language, just the actual font changed because the Jews adopted the Babylonian Aramaic font. Okay, what else are we at? Were the 10 Commandments written in Hebrew that could be understood by modern Hebrew? It's the same answer. Anything from the biblical times was written in their biblical font, which is not the font we use today. The only time the Jews ever went back to use the ancient font were twice. When they revolted against Rome and wanted to mint patriotic coins, they wrote in the old font, because that was considered to be more authentic and patriotic. And if you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're written in what we call modern Hebrew letters, but every time God's name is mentioned, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, that's written in the ancient Hebrew, because that's considered to be more holy and more authentic. So even the Dead Sea Scrolls are written 2,000 years ago, God's name is written in the way the Jews wrote it 1,000 years before. They're the only 2 times that since 586, you see the ancient Hebrew. But any biblical thing that's been found, seals, inscriptions from the biblical time, is all written in the ancient Hebrew font. Paleo Hebrew, it's called. What else? Okay, there's all these different theories where the name Gezer comes from, but no one actually knows. There's no standard accepted version. There's a lot of different theories. All right, do we have any other questions on this wonderful evening? Do you think unvaccinated is okay, so people are starting to get political, I can see as well. So we'll leave the contemporary politics alone for now. Especially when people start throwing words apartheid and Nazis, and we'll just ignore that one for now. Yes, Steve, would you like to add anything?
No, I'll echo Esther's comment that it's fascinating as always. Does anyone else have any questions for Tuvia this evening?
Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us again. Stay safe, stay well. Do consider joining us for the rally, because as I said earlier, more than ever now, Israel needs us, and we need a show of support, a public show of support. So we have plenty of flags, we have plenty of handheld flags, we have music, and we have placards. So do consider joining us. As I said earlier, it will be, it's all being advertised on our Twitter page, our Facebook page, our website, and our newsletter. So I'm sure all of you will have, or many of you will have already received one today through your email. And in the meantime, as I said, stay safe, and we'll be hosting Tuvia again next month. Just bear with us over this challenging period, and we will be releasing dates in the coming, probably next week. We'll release them.
I do want to add something, Steve, if it's okay with you. I want to relate Abraham to the upcoming Zionist Federation and WZO rally on Sunday. People often ask me as a tour guide, especially one who wears a yidlet over here, what was like the first command the first Jew got? And people would assume that it was like to believe in God, because he was, that's the ritual skull cap. Abraham was the first monotheist. One would assume the first commandment would be believe in one God. But actually, as I mentioned in my interview for UCL, the first commandment, the first Jew got was 2 words, which was lech lecha, which literally means that you go. If you believe in something, you've got to follow your heart, not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk. And that's why Abraham left everything he knew. If you look in the Bible, his birthplace, his birth country, his parents' home, everything to go to a land that God showed him. So the first words the first Jew got was, you go. To Jew is to do. So if you love Israel and believe in Israel and feel connected to Israel, then you have to carpe diem, to seize the moment and go to this rally. You can't talk about how it's important and how people should go. You can't just talk the talk. You've got to do what Abraham and Sarah did, which is literally to walk the walk, right? To do is to do. So by learning about Abraham and Sarah, you also learn what you should all be doing this Sunday. I'll leave it from there for now.
Lovely addition. Thank you very much. Tuvia, as always, it's been a pleasure. Stay safe. We hope you have as few reasons to have to go running to your bomb shelter. Just stay safe, stay well, and everyone, the same to you, minus the bomb shelters, unless you are in Israel. So thank you very much. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.